Could you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome the members of the Winthrop Town Council here to Readfield. This is a joint meeting of both the council and the Select Board of Readfield. It is a work session, so it's mostly discussion between the two boards, and there's certainly an opportunity for some public input later in the meeting itself. I've asked Sarah Fuller if she would actually chair the meeting to control the flow of the meeting itself. And so without further ado, Sarah?
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate you being here, appreciate you hosting us, everyone for coming out, and so that we can have some good discussion about how to tackle this substantial problem, but one I think that we know needs to get fixed, and hopefully we can come up with some good steps forward to move it along. So since most of us are new here and just getting to meet each other for the first time, it probably makes sense to start with some brief introductions and go just around the table so that everybody knows each other. So Eric, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Eric Dyer, Readfield Town Manager.
Wendy Dennis, Cobussy Watershed District, Chair of the Maranacook Lake Outlet Dam Committee.
Wow, that's big. Catherine Mills-Woodson, Select Board, Readfield.
I'm Dennis Price, and I'm on the Select Board in Readfield.
John Parent, Select Board, Readfield.
Chris Salmon, Select Board, Readfield.
Bruce Burgoyne, Readfield Select Board.
Sarah Fuller, Winthrop Council.
Barbara Black, Winthrop Council.
Linda McDowell, Winthrop Council.
And Ryan Frosty, Town Manager for Winthrop.
And I do believe that Priscilla Jenkins, another counselor, is on her way, so appreciate that. We're going to try and keep to about an hour tonight. And there's not a large crowd here, but we'll do our best to answer questions if folks have points that they need clarified, as this is a rather technical matter. And most of you have been in one meeting or another about the dam previously. But feel free to raise your hands. We'll try to address those clarifying questions. And there is a public comment period that we've reserved a few minutes for towards the end of the meeting. We're going to start, though, with Wendy Dennis. She's going to present the overview and the status of where we are on the project and kind of what gets us to this point tonight. So, Wendy, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. We're going to go through this packet that I handed out, and some of it will be old hat to some of you folks, and others it will be new. So, I couldn't think of a way to weed out, tear it down and not give some background. So here we go. We're just going to flip through this packet. And in addition to the introductions that have already been made, on the second page in here you'll see a list of the Maranacook Lake Outlet Dam Committee members. In case any of you don't know who the members are, it's here for you, and some of them are here tonight. For Readfield, Bill Buck and Shelley Gerstein are here. And Winthrop, all three are here. Tom Heiss, Gary Dobbin, and Brian Keyser.
Wendy, excuse me, you forgot one.
Brian Keyser. So the representatives are set forth in the interlocal agreement between the two towns, saying that Readfield and Winthrop should each have two members plus an alternate, and Cobussy Watershed District also has a member. So I just wanted to say that there's been a lot of work done to design this project and to figure out the direction that we're headed in. Our committee, the Maranacook Lake Outlet Dam Committee, has had 47 meetings since we first started in August of 2013. 42 of them have dealt with the Maranacook Dam, how to fix it, how to better manage water levels in Maranacook Lake. That's happened over 4 years, so a lot of work has gone into this. We've also met, you folks have had to meet about this several times. We've met with DEP about it, the Maranacook Lake Association, engineers, so there's been a lot of work and effort gone into this. the towns have hired professional services so that we have a hydrologic study by local hydrologists, North Star Hydro. We have preliminary engineering studies. We have the final engineer designs ready, for a contractor to go with. We have the contractor specifications, and we have the bid package. So there's been a lot of work done. It's pretty solid. So we have, and those plans are stamped, ready to go for contractors. We have realistic cost estimates that were based on actual contractor bids. We started with estimates from the engineers, and then we put it out to bid, and we have actual bid information, so the costs have evolved into something that are more realistic. We also have an easement from an abutting property owner that will allow access for construction, and then if the construction is completed, then it will transition to permanent access for the towns to go to the dam to maintain it. So all these things are in place, and what we need now is to really solidify how this is going to get funded and get permits for it. So then if you flip to these two pictures, not everyone has actually seen the Maranacook Lake Dam, although it's just a very short distance from downtown Winthrop. In the top picture, as seen from the Memorial Drive or Bowden Street Bridge, on the left in the picture, you'll see there's a metal catwalk above the gate. The gate is just a small opening below that catwalk, less than a third of the whole distance of that catwalk there. In the middle is the concrete spillway. When the water is up to the top of that spillway, we were calling that the full pond elevation, but over the years we've learned that that's too high, and so the committee has set a target level lower than that to try to keep the lake at full pond, which we can't do until we modify the dam. And on the far right, there's a spillway that's a foot lower than the center spillway, which was added on in an attempt to try to get more water out of the dam. And it allowed for some improvement, but not enough. Then in the lower picture, you see, if you look at the other side of the dam, and you can see on the right, the gate. You can see that how it's not very wide. It's about 5 feet wide, and it's not very deep either. And in the middle concrete part is where we want to put the new gate, and that new gate would be about 20 feet wide, so it's a lot wider.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So you're saying that this 5 foot wide gate is what controls the entire water for the lake?
Well, the water has to come up to the top of that concrete and spill over in order to get some extra outflow there.
Okay, gotcha.
And the gate has been wide open for most of the time during the past several years. So flipping the page to what's wrong with this picture, this is more of a close-up picture of the dam center spillway. As it was after Carlton Woolen Mills, former owner of the dam, rebuilt it in 1995. And we discovered that they built it 15 inches too high. So that didn't help the water flow problem at all. You can see what happened the next year in 1996. There's a picture here of the boat launch on Route 41 in Readfield, the Maranacook Lake North Basin boat launch. And the dock is quite a ways out into the water there. Turning to the next page, in 2006, the towns of Readfield and Winthrop voted yes to own the Maranacook Lake Dam together. And right after, we'd already been developing plans and getting the funding ready to cut that 15 inches excess height off the dam. But once the towns owned it, then we moved forward with that plan. So within 10 days of them owning it, which happened to see here September 14th, the dam was legally transferred to the two towns. And about 10 days later, we hired the concrete cutting company to cut the 15 inches off the dam. So that helped too, but still problems, as you can see when you flip over and you look at North Cross Point, the public area in Winthrop. Hi, Priscilla. And you can see at the point in the upper picture where it's flooded, all of the riprap that's used to help protect the banking from erosion is underwater. It's at least a foot and a half above full pond at this point in time. And then in the lower picture, you can see what it would, what it looked like at another point in time when it was at the level that we'd like to have the full pond level at. That just means when you keep it at full pond or a little lower, if you get rain, the water will come up, but the idea is that it wouldn't come up as high as it did here. You have some room to play with and also wave action, you have protection. So then flipping again another picture, you've got the Winthrop Public Beach, spring high water, you can't see the beach, but at our target full pond elevation in the lower picture, you do have a beach. And then another example is the dock underwater, which had been put in quite a bit above the water, and then we got several inches of rain right before the 4th of July. Not this year, it was 2-3 years ago, I don't remember now. And the water came up quickly, and a lot of people's docks were like this. And that's not the worst situation, your dock underwater, but there's a lot of shoreline erosion that happens then. We try on the lakes to manage water levels between mid-May and mid-July for loon nesting and to not have too much water level fluctuation. This, of course, is a disaster for the loon nests that are on the shore. There are a lot of reasons why high water is a problem. If you look at this graph, the only one, okay? The point is, this graph is showing this year's fall drawdown. We try to draw the lake. When I say we, I'm talking about the Cobbossee Watershed District that the legislature has given the task of managing water levels within the Cobbossee Watershed District. So we try to draw lakes down below full pond so that for winter, so that there'll be protection against ice damage and there will be room for snow melt in the spring, and it helps alleviate flooding. So you could look at the lakes from Cobbossee over to Maranacook, the lake names on top, and then you look at the bars under each lake name. That's how far down below full pond the lake is currently, and those horizontal little bars are what the drawdown goal is for each lake. So you see Cobbossee and Torrey, they're at their drawdown goals. Tacoma Lake's just about. Wilson Pond, Pleasant Pond, they're about 5 inches above. They're on their way, not too bad. Cottonwagon Lake, not doing too well. Anabescook Lake, that's not going to happen this year. And that's because that dam only has a small opening in it, and you can see the drawdown goal is quite a bit lower than most of the lakes. That's because there are about 10 lakes that drain into Anabescook Lake. It takes a lot of water, so we have to have a low drawdown goal, which we almost never meet because that dam is under, the gate is undersized. And then you see Maranacook, which has the distinction of being the only lake that's actually above full pond right now. So it's not anywhere near its drawdown goal, which we don't expect it to get to until the lake is, the dam is fixed. And then if you look at the box on the right about Maranacook fall drawdown, it's really a fall refill, because as we went through that, the bar on the left where it's 14 inches below full, as we had a dry period this summer and into the fall, the only way we've been able to get levels down in Maranacook is to have a drought. And that's not really going to work for us too often. So,
it didn't happen this year.
well, you can see that it wasn't too bad later in October. And then we got rain. We actually had 7 1/4 inches of rain in October. And each week you can see the level, it's gone up, and it won't come down for quite a while now. So this is just to demonstrate why we need better control. So flip the page. For a couple of years, we worked on engineering evaluations of what can be done at the dam and how to get more water out. We had the hydrologic study done to find out what improvements are possible. It's a narrow opening for a large lake. The stream isn't that wide, the dam isn't that wide. So we can't really reach all the goals that we want to, but we had that study done to define what's possible, and then what can we, for water outflow, what can we build to meet that? So what dam modifications are feasible? And we talked about just enlarging the existing gate or cutting the spillway down more, or a combination of events. And working with the engineer, we found out that only a gate was going to provide the control you needed, and a larger gate. So then we moved along in the study and looked at 6 different options that utilized a deeper gate. And we looked at the costs and the water level improvements with the engineer and selected the 2 best alternatives for a more detailed evaluation. And we got more detailed cost estimates and design. And of those 2 options that we chose, an A and B, alternative B cost $120,000 more than A and didn't provide any better water management, really. So we selected alternative A. And that's, if you look at the page down, we again see the picture of the dam from the downstream side, and then a conceptual drawing of alternative A, where the existing gate is filled in with concrete, and that will help alleviate the problem of severe erosion control that we have on the stream bank next to that gate outflow now. And the new gate will go in 20 feet across in that concrete spillway. So then we moved on to the detailed engineering drawings, and you've got just an example of that in this one drawing. There are several of them that the engineer has provided, and that would be what the contractors will follow to put the... I have one more here. Okay. Pass this along to Sarah, please. And then the bottom of the page is just basically a table of contents from the technical specifications for construction. So there are a lot of the concrete specifications, the building that's going to house the gate control panel, everything. We have all that. So the construction goal. To be done in the summer and fall of 2017 was the first goal, but that didn't happen. 2018, we were hoping to do it, but now it seems like it's going to take longer than that probably to get the funding under control. So I'm guessing, we're all guessing that 2019 is the year, but we're going to set that schedule after we talk about the funding. And of course the schedule was changed. Why? Because of costs. We put the project out to bid earlier this year, late winter, and that was a lot of work, wasn't it, Eric?
Yes, ma'am.
So we got 2 bids back from Bancroft Contracting Corp. for $489,000 and from H.E. Callahan Construction for $414,000. And while that was out, we were going through the process from December through June of the municipalities raising money towards this project. And, you know, Readfield started their process in December, and then the final voting was in June in Readfield, and Winthrop was going through a process too. So the end result of that was that there was about $200,000 available. And we had $400-something thousand bids, so the project is delayed. Priscilla?
Yes. I don't really understand why the bids came in so much greater than what we anticipated, because I thought we had consulted with engineers and everybody to have an understanding that what we had saved for this event was going to be enough.
Well, I can only partially answer that. The contractors would have to answer more. I have had a conversation a while ago with one of the contractors, but apparently they thought it was going to be a lot more work to do this than what the engineers felt should be. And the head engineer on this project has been working 19 years on dam construction, so I think that he has a pretty good feel for it. But apparently the bidders felt that this gate, which is this Obermeyer system, is a little bit complicated. They felt that would take a lot more labor than what the consulting engineer thought. And the concrete costs were very high, and the consulting engineer had put in higher than average costs for concrete. There's a typical range of concrete. They were above even the typical cost for earthquake-resistant concrete. So we can only assume that the contractors were putting some more money in that category. For what, I'm not sure. Whether it was because they thought it would take a lot of labor, or they wanted to, because it's important with this type of gate that's secured at the bottom, that they wanted to make sure they were really covered and did that up to specs and didn't have anything go wrong. I'm not sure, but that was one of the reasons. So we did what we call the post-bid reality check, and we went back to see if
Like that.
this design, was it still considered the most cost-effective of the six we had looked at? Because maybe there was something about this particular design that was, now we had the contractor's bid, was going to make it cost more than was originally estimated. But the, not really, because all of the options that included putting a gate in the center involved concrete demolition, a lot of concrete work, bringing in cranes, and so when you looked at the cost compared to what you would get for reaching our goals, it was still the most cost-effective one. So then we looked at, well, is there an option that we've overlooked? We had looked at some, not putting in a gate, just cutting down the spillway and putting some boards in. And that wasn't going to get us where we wanted to be water level-wise, and with the manual operation, the Public Works Department or some dam operator would have to put them in, put the boards in, take them out. It wasn't, we eliminated that early on, but we looked at another more fine-tuned version of that with the engineer, and it would certainly cost less, but it would not achieve the goals. So that's why I have, the quote in here from the engineer, that the only way to reduce the flood condition significantly is with an operable gate, not a series of boards in a notch or a rectangle. And this Obermeyer gate is option was the one that we chose, was the one that would give us the best control. So then, can the cost be reduced from this 400-something thousand bids that we got? And we've only identified a few areas. For example, the contractors, there were a lot of insurance requirements in the bid, and there was one requirement that contractors pointed out to us, so we could probably eliminate that one. That's $5,000. There was another area with the structure that's to be used to house the gate controls, and if that was built differently, maybe you could save $10,000 to $15,000 there. So, and you would have to decide would it really be adequate. But so we're not talking about, we haven't identified very many ways to cut costs. We'd certainly look at it more with contractors and see if they could help us identify ways to cut costs. At the same time, there are some ancillary costs that are not in the bids. There's a clerk of the works. There's fencing for security. There's a third one that escapes me now that I had just to give as an example. So I think that it would be wise to budget for the costs that we have while working to see if we can reduce even, if we can reduce 5,000 here and 5,000 there, well, let's do it. Save everything we can. But for planning purposes, we would say don't plan on cost reduction. We've done that before and it hasn't worked out. So then at that point, this was all what we did after the bids. May and June, we had a lot of meetings with the town managers. So then it was left with the towns to fund the project. And at that point, Winthrop was going through a lot of financial budget problems and meetings and too much to focus on to deal with how they're going to fund the dam. But we did eventually, the towns decided that they wanted to accomplished something, and they've got some money in reserve, so let's do the stream bank erosion control component of the project. Get that done out of the way. That would be great. So, once again, we worked on bids.
We did a good job.
And, yes, we did a great job. We had the stream bank erosion control design upgraded. We've got a really good design, really good drawings now. Put it out to bid, and we got two bids, $48,000 and $43,500. And we've been talking to you folks about it costing, you know, each town no more than $10,000. So this was kind of a deja vu. We asked the contractors, you know, why, and they were contractors are really busy. You're going to pay to get one now, and we needed it now. We needed it yesterday. We actually bumped the bid due date later into the season because the contractors had asked us questions and we wanted to make sure we had all the answers. So by the time that was all done, they had to be ready to roll like that. That's costing money as well. And then also, we think that the estimate for materials was about $10,000 too high from each contractor. They overestimated the quantity. And I think that might be in response to some of the language that we used. But if we had had time, we could have renegotiated that with a low bidder and said, okay, we really only want this much riprap. But at that point, we didn't have time to renegotiate. It still would have been $10,000 more than the upper limit. And we were thinking that maybe some would be spending extra money because they'd have to mobilize twice. Contractors come out to do this project, then they come out another year to do the other project. We had thought that that would be offset by having more variety of local contractors available to do this project and might be less expensive than some of the larger companies that you might need for the gate installation. And we did get 6 contractors come to our site visit, but for all those reasons, the costs were high, and the dam committee didn't come to the decision to delay the project on its own. The dam committee consulted with the town managers and really took guidance from them that this wasn't the time to do this because it was costing too much. And now we still have questions about, are we really going to be able to fund the whole project, and why spend more money than we thought we would have to on this little component, even though it's important and it needs to get done. Well, so does the whole water level management dam modification project. So let's see, is there a way to do it? And so that's why we're here tonight.
Excellent. And so we do have some numbers that have been put together for trying to figure out the total cost and how that gets proportioned and how it might be bonded. And so I believe that Eric, you took the lead on setting this up, and so I don't know if you want to walk us through what you've prepared.
Yeah, I can do that. It certainly is, this proposal really was in response to the fact that we had that kind of second try at a project component, and it just didn't look like it was going to go. So I thought it would be important to try to put together one path forward, one of many. And this was just the first thing that came up that made sense. And there's certainly pieces of this that aren't workable. I know the time frame for the schedule is already in question to some extent. The borrowing jointly certainly in question. But this was an effort to find out roughly with a bonded project what the cost would be. And we started off looking at this and saying that we know this is going to be around $450,000 based on past estimates, really between those two numbers that we had for bids. Who knows what's going to happen when we put this out again, but we've got a range there. And as Wendy said, we have a number of indicators that we may be able to lower the cost. Maybe, maybe not, but oftentimes the best way to plan something and to look at a future cost, it says draw a straight line. And following with those averages and planning that we'll have increases and decreases, and they'll probably come close to balancing out perhaps. I feel confident that in that range of $450,000 would be the actual cost. Looking at a buffer puts us right in the range of about $500,000, $500,000. And so I did look at bonding for that amount in the context of the funds that both towns currently have available, and then adjusting that accordingly based on the percentages that we have for this project. And I've got them in here someplace. Wendy knows them probably off the top of her head, but I believe we are 53.3% for Readfield and 46.7% for Winthrop. And so that exercise led to essentially the conclusion, looking at a 7-year bond with I think I said 3% interest, 3%, which is high for a main bond bank bond. It would likely be much closer to 2.5. If you're looking at working with a bank as opposed to the main municipal bond bank, say Inverskogen or local, you might be looking at 3.5% or a little bit more for a similar time period, if they're even able to offer something like that. But the end result of this bond analysis was that each town would be on the hook for roughly $25,000 for the next 7 years, $25,000 per year. And that balances out more or less because the town of Readfield has a little bit more money in the bank, but we also have a little bit higher obligation because of the shoreline. So there's a lot of different ways to approach financing this. Bonding is just one way, and even within the bonding world, there are some different scenarios that might play out. I had originally proposed, as I said, working collaboratively to have both towns working together on a joint bond. I did talk with our bond counsel from Bernstein Sher, who, Freddie Flaherty. They're going to kill me if I said wrong law firm.
Maybe you're on tape too. You have to let them see it.
Freddie Flaherty, and they have given us good counsel in the past and said, it's probably going to cost you more to develop the financial document that would be required to manage something like that. Much like a school district might have, or a large municipal waste organization like on Mount Desert Island. It would be a little bit more complicated than what we probably want to get into, and the costs would probably exceed the cost of duplicating bond counsel. Bond counsel for borrowing in this amount could be $2,000 to $3,000 in that range, and if we were both borrowing independently, it would be more or less a wash, and maybe a little bit more expensive to try to do it together, and more complicated. So the suggestion that they had was that we look at just putting together a one-page interlocal agreement that would help establish the fact that we were working together towards this goal, that we did have a time frame, and that we had expectations for each community with respect to borrowing amounts, maybe targets, maybe nothing firm, but and a time frame for meeting some of those milestones along the way. And that tied well with the other part of this memo, which was a proposed time frame. Working backwards from the bond council, or excuse me, the bond main bond bank schedule. And that really was the focus, but it doesn't have to be the only way we schedule this. We came up with some dates, and the other important component of this for us as well as you is voter approval, town meeting approval, making sure that everybody is able to go through their proper legislative process. So those are some important things that came up, and the other key piece here is permitting. And that's going to be one of the first things we'll want to look at because permitting will help ensure that we get good construction estimate costs and that those numbers that come in can be more reliable. Once we get those numbers from the contractors, we'll be able to do our budgeting more reliably, hopefully much more reliably, and then move forward. There's a certain sequence that we would want to go through. But again, depending on how you or how we approach the borrowing, it could change. But I don't believe at this point that we want to mess around too much with getting started on planning for a rebid of this project and for planning to get the permitting taken care of in a very timely fashion in the next couple months if we can. Get it underway, hopefully get it completed. So that's a fairly long summary, but that's what I had presented to Ryan and Wendy as an initial idea, and it's taken some forward motion.
Great, well, thank you for the legwork on that. I think it's useful to have
Sure.
a starting point for the discussion and to have something to look at. So with that, yeah, open it up for some questions and clarifications. Priscilla?
First of all, I just need to express frustration. It seems to me, our committees and our council and select people and our committee has the stakeholders here, two of them, and I just am frustrated that even with due diligence, we've ended up with this kind of a situation. I just want to express that frustration. Secondly, this would be a lot longer lead time than the bids we put out for last time. Should that help reduce costs maybe? I mean, no, we're not going to count on that. I'm hearing you say that too, but it sounded to me in what your summary is of why the discrepancy, one of the problems was lead time. You had 4 or 6 companies come out and only 2 bid.
Yeah, we're hoping that would work to prevent it, to have the longer lead time.
So this longer lead time, though, I'd like to know from the property owner's perspective, the one that gets eroded all the time, what you're feeling about this being moved 2 years more.
We had a windstorm a couple of weeks ago, as you're all aware of. There were a lot of Hail Marys that night because of the, as a matter of fact, because of that windstorm, I spent the money myself to take down a couple of those trees taken down because of the erosion. And I couldn't wait any longer. Our primary concern is, well, first of all, one of the things I wanted to point out was in this packet that Wendy put together, the last picture in there, that building that's showing in that picture is no longer there. Every summer I would have to get out there and jack that building up about 6 inches because it kept sinking into the stream and because of the erosion. And so that building is no longer there, that's gone. Our primary concern as property owners is the control of the erosion that's being caused by the gate that was put there when they renovated that dam. They put it over next to the stream bank, next to our house, and we have lost at least 5 feet of embankment since we've been there. We've been there for over 20 years, and we right now, at the time, when Carlton Woolen Mills owned that dam, they did not have a right-of-way across our property to get to it. They approached us, and we were negotiating with Carlton at the time, and they obviously went bankrupt and went out of business. The towns assumed ownership of the dam, and so the town of Winthrop approached me, and I told them, I said, you know, Carlton was going to give us an extremely lucrative compensation for the right-of-way, and I said, the only thing I'm going to ask from the town, being a taxpayer, the only thing I'm going to ask from the town is fix the erosion. Take care of stabilize the embankment, fix the erosion, and you can have your right-of-way. So that's all I'm asking in exchange. No monetary compensation, just stabilize the embankment. So right now, yes, we are frustrated, but and I think we could probably last another couple of years. We got about 4 feet before it gets to the house. I'm serious. I had to fence off that side of the house. We can't even use it because there's only about 4 feet of embankment left there. So anyway, and the other point I wanted to make was I volunteered for the dam committee because nobody knows that dam like we do. We sleep with it we've been living with that dam next to our bedroom for the last 20 plus years. So I know all the problems that come with it, and I figured that's probably, I would probably be of some benefit to the dam committee when it comes to deciding what needs to be done. And I think this committee has worked extremely hard. I'm very proud to be working with these people because Wendy has put in an extreme number of hours into this project, as has the rest of the committee. And we have some very well-qualified and knowledgeable people on this committee, and I am very pleased with the decisions that they've made, the direction that we're going with this. And I am not going to speak for the rest of the committee, but as a committee member, I've been extremely frustrated with the funding picture that we've been faced with. It's your responsibility, and I understand what you're going through. It's just that the one point I wanted to make, by the way, was that you're talking about putting this off for another year. And we could probably do that as property owners, living next to the, sleeping next to that embankment. But I guess one of the points I wanted to make, and just something to think about, is according to the time frame that you've got here, that Eric had put together, the bids and the contractor selection is going to be done in March of 2018. We have funding, I believe, available to do the embankment stabilization. So the only thing I'm going to ask is that, can we go ahead and proceed with the embankment stabilization if that's going to be a part of this project and a part of this bid package? Can we get the contractor to go ahead and get started on that next summer? That was the only request that I was going to put out here on the floor. I didn't mean to speak so long, but I just wanted to give you a background of the property owners next to the dam, what we've been doing.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. You have a unique perspective that has been and continues to be pretty pertinent and valuable to the work that we're facing.
Catherine Woodson. I have two things. One is a comment or sort of an answer to a question that Priscilla asked of Wendy earlier about the estimates. And what I recall from several years ago, having been on the board and on the budget committee, I guess is where we heard this, John, the original engineers really did not want to give us an estimate for this project. And we pushed and pushed, and they said, but it probably won't be accurate. There's so many variables, and we pushed, and I think that's when we got the 105,000, or was that 105 each town?
Probably 100.
I think that was the total.
I think that was the first total, and then the project.
But that was a voluntary answer. We hadn't hired anybody to give us an answer.
Right.
We were being.
And so we were kind of hopeful at that point that maybe that's what it would be. And then when we had the plans made, and again, the engineer did the best that he could using estimates, we were in the 200-something range. And so we were all kind of banking on that, which I think is why we came up with 200 in funding. And then it just didn't come out that way. And so I just wanted to add that bit of history into that. It wasn't completely unknown, but it was kind of surprising. The discussion we had here in Readfield last year about this, and I wrote it down so I could be a little bit more succinct and not take up too much time, but we looked at this is like a road. And if we had a road that was deteriorating and causing safety issues and concerns for our residents, we would probably take care of it. And that we owe it to our lakefront owners. We get a lot of income, each of our towns, from these lakefront property owners. Much of that is seasonal, and those people have very little impact on the rest of our town services. Very little for fire, for rescue, nothing for education. We do have a lot of full-time property owners that use all the full services of the towns. But I think our discussion centered around this is very important for these people. We can't just put it off because it's people who aren't here all the time, or because it's on the lakefront and we don't all see it. If it was a road we were all driving over, we would get this done. And I'm not saying that the timeline has any impact on that. I understand the whole bidding process of that. So I think my approach to this is I want us to do it properly, which I think is the plan that we have in front of us, and I think we need to do it promptly. I think we need to come up with a funding plan tonight that we think we can propose to our citizens that's reasonable, and I think we need to work hard to push that and explain it and promote it and sell it, and then we need to get this on the way. And I love the suggestion about seeing if we can put into the actual bid that goes out, or the bid requirements, to see if we can do it a little bit of the two-stage to get that erosion control first. I mean, I understand the setting up the whole project twice, and I'm not really clear on, do we have to wait for the bonds to be issued before we can actually commit to the project? Or can we commit knowing that we're going to be applying and getting it? I mean, I know we know we'll get it, but how does that piece of the legal process work? Could this work all be done next year is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I certainly agree with the example of a road. We certainly have millions of dollars of shorefront and property owners, and we do need to do this. I'm hoping tonight that we can, I don't think we'll have a calendar tonight, but I do think we can have some sort of working agreement that we can both go back to our respective boards and planning and basically direct perhaps the town managers to come up with a plan, a calendar that we can then agree on and present to the public. I am a little leery of putting this too far out. I can only see costs escalating if we do that. So if we start talking beyond some of the dates that we've talked tonight, I think we're pie in the sky if we think it's going to be less expensive in out years. So I'm certainly looking forward to trying to get this done in this decade. I can't believe I'm actually using that term, but those are the steps that lie before us.
No, I agree. I think that if we can come up with some kind of guidelines or some general sense of what we want to fund, and I think the figure of the 450 to the 500 to be on the safe side. It's always better to have the money available and not have to use it, rather than be like, oh, we run into another delay because we didn't request enough money and the project is going to cost more. If there's a way to accelerate the timeline, and whether it depends on, because the municipal bond bank only issues twice a year, that creates some very limited structural things in terms of the schedule. We've had some previous luck looking at bond bank versus financial institutions where the interest rates and the deals have been lower, and we've gone with banks versus the bond bank. So I would suggest that we look at all those options, especially given the scheduling, and that the rates are probably going to be fairly competitive or close to competitive. And then we might be able to adjust that somewhat.
It may be worth 0.25% or 0.5% to borrow sooner by a year because of the inevitability of the project being needed sooner than we expect.
Right, or the conditions worsening and requiring more material or more labor to do that. Linda.
Tom, is there anything, I know that you're scared to death living in that house in a windstorm. Is there anything that we can do to help shore up a little bit more or take down some trees or something that we can help you to feel more safe?
The trees.
The trees?
That's a ledge there. You need to understand that's a ledge.
Oh, I know. I got it in my house.
Yes, you have it. It's under your house.
Yep.
There's a little bit of soil there, but what's happening is that the roots are cracking the ledge, and every spring when we have the ice out, I would, as a matter of fact, I would suggest, highly suggest that every one of you stop by the week of ice out. That is when you look at that dam, The water is, I have a lower patio down there, and that lower patio is at times a foot and a half underwater. And what happens is that it's rushing through the gate that's currently there, and it's a jet stream. And it's right up against the house, and it's washing away that embankment. Chunks of, chunks are falling off, about 6 to 8 inch blocks of rock that are falling off, and in the springtime they're getting washed away. So the embankment is, like I said, with some Hail Marys, we could probably last another year or two, but I don't think any longer, because we're down to about 4 feet, 4.5 feet of embankment. And getting rid of, there's one tree that's leaning, and I know the northerly wind is not a problem because it's leaning to the north. It's when we get the southeasters, the hurricanes off of the coast, when we get those winds. That was the wind we had in this storm we had a couple of weeks ago. And I was, to be honest with you, I was quite surprised that tree is still standing. It's a sizable tree. It's, as a matter of fact, it's one that we're planning on using it to build a memorial to Bill Wayne. Bill Wayne, who passed away, he was on the dam committee. So anyway, what you can do first is get rid of the trees. I've already taken a couple of them down because I just couldn't wait any longer, and I had a pinnacle tree out there a couple of weeks ago, and I talked to the code enforcement officer, got his permission, take them down, get rid of them. So I did that, but there's a couple of big ones there that need to come down, and they've got to be a part of this project because that's the only way DEP is going to give us permission to take the trees down as part of this project. The only way I got the permission for the trees I took down is because they were dead and dying, and they cracked in the storm. But once those trees touch, we can't touch them.
I'd like to, first of all, I'm on the record, please, for bonding and moving this project forward and trying to, make that case in my community. But I do want to ask and try to get some reaction around the table, if I could, about the timeline that Eric put here, and understand that this isn't written in gold by any means, but does that make sense as a starting place for targeting the completion of this project? And I think there are some variables like the erosion issue that once we've figured out exactly the pathway to funding, we can move some of those components around, and should as quickly and as close to initiation as we can. But what are people's reactions to this timeline? And Wendy, your reaction too is important.
Well, let's hear from some other people first.
Sure.
I'm happy to tell you my reaction.
Good.
Priscilla?
I'll take a plunge.
Sure.
I'm going to go on record as saying I think the bonding is the better way to go, rather than trying to figure out another alternative at this stage of the game. I would like to see it split. I don't know, you've been through this bid exercise twice now, but if we can split it into erosion control this year and the dam the following year. I don't know whether that'll work, but I'd love to see it if it did. And I have to say, it's aged as one of those things. 4% sounds like a lot to some people, but doesn't sound like that much to me.
In terms of an interest rate, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my first mortgage was like 12.5.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah. Who else? Thoughts on schedule, bonding, other avenues? Yes.
I think the schedule, if we go with bonding besides the bond bank, we might be able to move the schedule a little to our favor. I definitely think bond is the only way we're going to be able to fund this for both towns.
You're right.
And it has to be done. It just has to be done.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I'm glad we both have money in the bank to start with.
Yeah.
Well, speak for yourself.
Okay.
You guys have some.
I think we have some. I'll talk to you later. John?
As far as timing goes, it seems like, Catherine, you and I were on the budget committee for 6 years before. It seems like we've been talking about this thing forever. I would have liked to seen it done 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So this schedule to me seems slow. I would like to see us try to accelerate it and get it done faster, if possible. Maybe it's not possible, and maybe we'll fall into the same contractor issue where if we say, look, we gotta have this done in 6 months, you know, then you're gonna pay for that contractor to, you know, set some other stuff aside and do the work for you. Bonding is, in my opinion, the only way to go, and we have some money set aside in the budget, but, you know, to hit the taxpayers for another, who knows, 150,000, all in one chunk, you know, would be, I think, too much. So bonding certainly would, I think, is the only way to go. And I've got a couple of questions. So as far as the 2 bids that we received, why would we think that rebidding, other than maybe giving them more time, would be any better? Certainly wouldn't be lower than what we've got now, what we're looking at here,
I wouldn't think so.
right?
But,
I mean, you're
if
probably...
you're asking me, I wouldn't think so.
Right.
Um,
Now,
probably for other people to-
these bids, are these bids figured on this time schedule? Or
No, those bids,
those bids are today's
Were
materials and work?
they were in April for this project. This project would be finished like right now, based on those bids.
Mhm.
It was
Right.
to be done in the summer and fall of 2017.
And the other question, the erosion control cost,
Yes.
separated here, are these in these bids?
Well, that's where we came up with the estimate that it would cost no more than $20,000, because the erosion control work was in that estimate, but it wasn't, the mobilization costs were elsewhere, so we couldn't take
It's hard
out
to figure.
that from the bids
Yeah.
for the whole project.
But can
and
we,
address it. And the amount of materials that the 2 bidders for the erosion control project bid on was higher than the other bids. So we had some basis for our expectation based
Mhm.
on the first bids, and then we got the new bids, which are higher, and I think we can correct them down a bit in the future by being more clear about exactly how much material
so
we
you,
want them to use, because we've had the plans revised and that's more clear now.
would this, for instance, the 43.5, which is the low bid for the erosion control, would some of that come off of the bid for the whole project? I mean,
Yes, some of that would come
it
off the
should.
bid for the whole project, yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, probably not the 43.5, because we've got,
That was a pull-out component.
Yeah, right.
what's that?
That was actually a pull-out component when we did that, correct?
But it came in 20,000 more than what we
Right.
thought.
I understand that.
So I think we pulled out about 23,000, thinking
Right.
that's what it would cost.
So, other thoughts or questions?
Yeah,
Linda?
I mean, I think we should bond. I think that it should be done sooner. However, it depends on the cost. I'm not willing to go extremely higher if the cost is higher if we do it sooner, but I'm willing to look at that. But I agree that we really shouldn't wait. That, you know, I think this is a little bit too long, the schedule. But again, it depends on what the cost is gonna be, if we can do it sooner.
So-
Can I make an observation?
Tom?
One thing you gotta keep in mind is that the water level is very high in the springtime. So, when we're talking about the embankment stabilization, that work, in my opinion, I'm not the engineer, but in my opinion, I would think the water level would have to be a lot lower than it is in the springtime anyway. So I don't think it's something that you could do in March or April. when you have the ice out.
No, but you probably, if this timeline was accelerated, you could probably do it in August, September,
October.
October, like
Can I
that.
speak to that for a minute, please?
Yeah.
In this timeline, when it says April to June, the dam project completed in its entirety, was the project, we were, in our first bid, we were scheduling 4 months for the project to get done, because you've got to give the Obermeyer manufacturer, you've got to give them lead time for
Making the gate.
making it available to us and delivering it. So, and April, it really is too early to start. But I think that, well, Eric put down April to June 2019, and it would be more likely that it would be during the summer. At least that tells you that in this timeline, that it wouldn't be happening in 2018. And the point is, it would be happening in 2019. And my understanding is that that's dictated by the bond bank process, and I'm not really experienced with that, so I definitely defer to the town managers and the council and select board about those matters. And as far as the stream bank erosion control project, there are, just to give you some facts, there are reasons to do it as part of the overall project. We already talked about that it would cost a little, your total cost would be a little more if you did it separately. That doesn't mean that you might not decide that it's worth it. I'm just saying that factually it would cost more. And also we were running a risk by doing it ahead of time, in that once you get the dam modified so that there's a new gate in it, you can draw the water down, and then you can do the stream bank stabilization project without crossing your fingers and counting on good weather. And the cofferdams could be flooded. Even with the whole dam project, we have to count on the weather to not be so extreme as to overtop the cofferdams and cause delays. I mean, this could happen, I'll have to pay for that. But originally it was part of the whole project because it would be sequenced such that you'd fix the gate first, and then it would be later in the season, in the fall, when the water's lower, and you'd have the new gate to draw the water down to do the stream bank stabilization project. I'm not saying that's the only way you can do it. I'm just saying you might want to consider that. Or, you know, everybody wants to move forward with the stream bank stabilization project, which is why we worked hard to do it. We ran into the problem of, now it costs too much. There are some other considerations too. That's one of them. As far as trees coming down, there may be a way that we could take some of the trees down first, but not really do the riprap until later. But Tom's right with respect that DEP isn't going to give the permit they need to. The permitting gets tricky, and it was also, it's more work to do 2 permits. If you do this separately, you're going to have to go for a permit for stream bank stabilization, which is what we were doing, and we were trying to rush with it. We were going to have to get an after the fact permit.
Right.
We don't want to do that anymore, but still, 2 permits to go through the whole permitting process twice. That's something that we've decided we wanted to avoid. There may be a way we can look at, if there's a way to just get permits, a simple process to just do limited tree cutting to alleviate some of that problem. I know, I'd certainly be happy to look into it. And the towns can decide and guide the committee to do however they want to do this, as 2 separate projects or one. But there are benefits to doing it all as one. As it is, it's going to be tight to have the staff time to get the permit for this schedule to put the bids out when it is due. So that's another thing to keep in mind. For the bids to go out in March, it may have to be bumped back a couple of months, but there's still, if it wasn't for the bond bank timeline, this project, the whole thing, could probably be done in 2018, a little later in that.
So
That's
if
what
we
I
go
would
with
like
a
us to
bond
do.
besides the bond bank, we could step up the schedule.
This is where I step back. I don't.
Yes, yeah, so that's basically because the municipal bond bank only issues bonds twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall, whereas your normal financial institutions will issue them at any point needed throughout the year. And I think that if at least from what I'm hearing around the table, is that there's consensus around, yes, bond the project, yes, look at the higher amount to cover what we might need, and if we need less, that's okay. Look at accelerating the project and looking at additional funding options outside the bond bank to try to accelerate the schedule as much as possible, with the understanding that there's certain constraints in terms of DEP permitting, construction contractor availability, and environmental factors that may impact actual start and completion of the project. Does that sound accurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds accurate to me. I'd like to propose, and we cannot vote tonight because we're in workshop mode, but that we ask the two town managers to consult with Wendy to put together a schedule. I am quite open to 2018. I would love to go to my town meeting and say, finally, this is it.
Yes.
This is what we're going to do. And this is how much it's going to cost, and so on and so forth. So I'd like us to informally ask the two town managers to do that, to consult with Wendy and to consult with the respective chairs who will listen to their boards in regards to this. Everybody think that's a head nod, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. I think there was a question, sir.
Yeah, I think...
I'm Bill Block.
Bill, yes.
Great.
Don't overlook the economy. My neighbor just finished a brand new house in my neighborhood. He delayed the building for 8 months. The materials cost 30% more.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking at with the hardwoods in this picture. Put it together as completely as possible. Get started. It only will cost more money.
Right.
Every day you delay, it's going to cost more.
Thank you for that. I think that seems like we're all in agreement to try and now, once we decided that we're going to, bond it, spread those costs over so it's manageable and bite-sized for both of our budgets and our voters. We'll try to get it done as soon as makes sense.
And that's all with, obviously, the provision that we will send that through our respective budget committees.
Absolutely.
There's a process that goes with that.
Yeah. Indeed. Priscilla?
Just one, we didn't do any commercial bank investigation so far, is that true in terms of the commercial bank?
Right, that's one of the things that we'll be asking the town managers as they kind of look at schedule and get a feel for what potential interest rates would be so that we can compare the two of those to see where the financial differences may lie.
And the two towns are getting their own bonds.
That's correct.
We want to go for 10 years or 15 years because this dam is going to last for 40 years.
Hopefully.
20 years?
More.
Okay, so if you're looking, let's go more conservative and let's say it's 30 years or more generous, less generous, whatever. You can still justify bonding for 10 or 15 years on something that's going to last for 30 years to assist in being able to get the project going. And we might do 5 years, we might do 10, you might do 15, or you might do 2. It doesn't matter, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The banks may have a little issue with a certain timeline for the amount of money, but other than that.
Right.
Do we want to discuss that? I mean, Bruce and I have said, 4% didn't scare us, but what would scare you, for instance?
I'm not really in favor of 4%.
I hope it's not going to be 4%.
It all, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Well,
Hopefully that's more than what we're going to find it is.
Yeah.
I think basically based on the other borrowing that we've done.
We've done 2%.
We've done, we haven't seen anything that high.
Right.
So.
No.
I think it's a deviation from what the bond bank would offer that you want to consider. So if it's 1/4 to 1/2%, for example, is that worth it to accelerate the project? Probably is. If it's 2%, probably isn't. So I think that's the driver there, is what is that cost of that money?
You got to look at the interest versus the extra cost of product.
That's right.
The interest might be a lot less than a 30% cost in material.
Yeah.
Also. Yeah.
And it's worth shopping several banks, I think, too.
Absolutely. John?
Bruce, I understand you when you say I'd like to go to the next town meeting and say this is it. But I think we better be darn sure that this is it. because we've been, we've been dancing around this thing for a long time, and the costs have gone up and up. And you know as well as I do that when we have hearings on this, the first question that comes up is, how come the cost has doubled? And if we go in with 500,000 and all of a sudden it's 550 or 6, there's going to be some pushback. And so we need to make darn sure that it is, it's going to be darn close to what we say it's going to be this next trip around. And I agree with you. I'd like to bring it to the public as soon as possible, but let's not rush things and have another surprise.
Right.
I agree with that. To me, it's the accomplishment date and concluding this very long process that I want to accomplish.
And just because your process is different from ours in terms of your budgeting, normally you'd bring these things to your regular town meeting, which happens in March.
No.
Or June. Yours happens in June.
And it's not a floor meeting, it's a vote.
It's a secret ballot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that before I got here, I said I wasn't going to say anything because I wanted to listen. But I did, and I have. The first question, and I asked the first question. Well, thank you very much, because I feel like I know a lot more about this, but my feeling is still pretty much the same, that what I think is interesting is, it's such a clear, to me, that reason I asked the question is because I could not believe that gate is responsible for the entire. Like, it seems so out of touch with what the reality of that lake is. And in order for us to charge our proper duty to the towns, it seems a no-brainer to adopt this project with the idea that I agree with John, get it right the first time. A project that seems to have been marred by a number of get it wrong the first 2 or 3 times. Getting it right this time and doing it right the first time, I think, is exactly why, I like the idea, always as a teacher, I like the idea of moving it along quicker, but not at the risk of, you don't want to throw out and make it that sort of thing. I want to get it done, you know what I mean? I absolutely agree, and I think as soon as we can, it's very important. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
Your attitude, by the way, is exactly the motivation that this committee has had. Let's do it, let's do it right.
Well, yeah,
so
yeah.
It's done once and it's done.
Yeah, I don't know if it can go in the public record, but my mother had a creative way of saying, don't half.
Charlie's putting his computer away, but he might remember that.
So yes, sir.
I think it's don't have fun.
Yeah, that's exactly it, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Exactly. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay, thanks. So I think there's a lot of great consensus around the table, so appreciate that. Appreciate the tremendous work and the dozens of meetings that the dam committee has had. It's a very tricky subject, and with the setbacks, really valuable to have your guys' dedication to this project. Before we wrap up, we wanted to open the floor for some public comments, and if there's any additional questions or concerns that folks have, so we can address those before we head out and let the town manager and Wendy and the committee continue with their work. All right.
Then I would ask one thing.
Yes, please.
We didn't actually assign a timetable to the town managers and Wendy and us to come back with something. We're getting ready to enter our...
Yeah, they thought they'd know it.
They thought they'd know it. You know better than that, Eric. 4 weeks?
Hopefully less, but yeah, I can make this a priority, and it's going to be a little bit tough with the holidays and all that, but
there's some informality about this at this point, but to get the skeleton in place so we can start hanging something.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it really is important for us to get right on starting the permitting work, get right on getting the bid package finalized, all those things, because the only real surefire way to make sure that we don't misfire on this again, for whatever the reason, is to know that we have bids in before we go to the voters asking for money.
Yes.
That's the key.
That's what we need.
That's the key, is having a firm number that we can say, this is what we've got.
Yep.
Are your specs going to have to be changed a whole lot?
Not much at all. We're very, very well positioned to work on this. The DEP permit is going to be the big question, because that's important, again, in order to have a reliable bid, so.
Okay.
Good, no, and it'll be very good, especially as we kind of head into the new year for us to just budget planning and knowing, you know, how many parcels we've got to kind of prioritize head into our season as well. Priscilla?
Yeah, I just want to capture Tom's concern about the trees, and when do you think they would need, I mean, how fast could we get DEP approval, and when do you think they need to come down?
Well, if this is part of the project, the overall project, you know, as opposed to, that's why I'm confused about a separate permit. I thought this was all going to be one project, one permit.
Our hope
It
is
is,
one permit.
Yeah.
That's our goal.
And I guess the point I was making was that to do the trees and the stabilization, do it this year. You can't do it in the spring, but maybe later in the summer when the water level is down. The trees, once we get the permit, I would think we could take the trees down. We don't have to wait for the water level to go down.
Right.
That can be done like this in my front yard. And I've already resigned to the fact that I'm giving up my front lawn for the next 2 years, with the stipulation that it's restored. My sewer line is across there. That's probably, I want to make sure I can flush my toilet afterwards without it backing up. So there's a lot of things I'm asking, but the trees, I would like to see that as soon as we get the permit, as soon as possible, get the trees out of there.
So again, I don't know how that would change the bid process, because I don't know whether those trees are in this or not, but that might be a separate contract.
They were, and the contractors, one of them was going to subcontract the tree work, and the other had, didn't specify they might or might not. But it certainly seems like we could do something about the trees as the first step, once we get the permit.
Great. Other questions or comments before we adjourn?
Anyway, to answer your question, Priscilla, I'm on the dam committee. They will hear my opinion.
You can attend that meeting.
I just have a closing comment. Thank you to Ryan and all of you for coming here. Really appreciate it. It's been so nice to see faces and hear voices, see the head nods and the frustration that we're all feeling. I think it's really valuable, and it shows a desire to work together, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
No, I'd echo that, and again, thank you for hosting us, since we're having an election at our. We like to have a lot of elections in Winthrop,
Yeah. Polls 2 hours earlier, we might have had a full council.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Come right up. Can we cut down those trees if we don't have the right of way?
No.
Okay, so the right of way has to be.
The question is, can we legally cut down the trees? It's not about a right of way, it's about DEP shoreline and.
No, I know that, but
We
my question
have
is.
a permanent easement.
Okay, that's what my question was, because I know that we can't do something on private property.
We have a permanent easement.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's all good.
Okay.
Thanks to Tom. With that, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.